The Bible mentions dragons, and it wasn't a metaphor. When you think of the Bible, you probably think of parables, psalms, and shepherds. It's a book of faith, history, and moral teachings. But what if I told you that same book contains some of the most vivid and terrifying monster stories ever put to paper? That the scriptures describe giant, sea-dwelling dragons, creatures so powerful they were seen as forces of nature. And what if God himself isn't just a distant creator, but a warrior who battles them in a cosmic abyss? This isn't a modern fantasy novel. This is the world of the Old Testament. The Bible speaks of a creature called Leviathan, a twisting sea serpent of immense power, untouchable by any human weapon. And while modern readings often write this off as poetry, a closer look suggests the ancient authors were describing something they believed was terrifyingly real. For them, the line between a metaphor and a monster was blurrier than you think. Part 1. The Creature Profile. Leviathan. To get a handle on this, we have to go to the book of Job, chapter 41. After Job questions the nature of God's justice, God finally answers. But he doesn't give a simple explanation. Instead, he points to his own creation and hits Job with a challenge. Have you ever tried to take on Leviathan? What follows isn't a gentle parable. It's a field guide to a monster. God asks Job, "Can you pull in Leviathan with a fish hook or tie down its tongue with a rope?" The point is obvious. This thing is way beyond human control. It can't be tamed or domesticated. The description gets even more intense, almost like a zoological report from a nightmare. God details its physical form. His strong scales are his pride, shut up as with a tight seal. One is so near to another that no air can come between them. It's a picture of a creature wrapped in impenetrable armor. Some have tried to link Leviathan to a real animal, like a crocodile or a whale. But the biblical description quickly goes off the rails of known biology. The text says, "His sneezes flash forth light, and his eyes are like the eyelids of dawn. From his mouth go burning torches, sparks of fire leap forth. His breath sets coals aglow, and a flame goes forth from his mouth." Let's be real. No natural animal breathes fire. This is the language of a dragon. The writers of the Bible were tapping into a deep, ancient tradition of monstrous sea creatures that stood for the wild, chaotic forces of the world. The profile in Job establishes Leviathan as a creature so fearsome that, as God says, no one is so fierce that he dares to stir him up. The point God is making to Job is this: if you can't even begin to comprehend this one creature I've made, how can you possibly question my cosmic power? The argument hinges on Leviathan being seen as a real and overwhelming power, whether literal or symbolic. Part 2. The Divine Battle. But Leviathan isn't just some untamable beast. In other parts of the Bible, it's God's direct adversary. In the ancient Near Eastern worldview, creatures like Leviathan and another monster named Rahab weren't just animals. They were symbols of the primordial chaos that existed before God brought order to creation. Many creation stories from neighboring cultures, like the Babylonian myth of Marduk battling the sea goddess Tiamat, start with a god fighting a great sea monster to create the world. The Bible uses this theme to make a powerful statement. Our God is the one who defeated chaos. Psalm 74 declares, "It was you who split open the sea by your power. You broke the heads of the sea monster on the waters. It was you who crushed the heads of Leviathan and gave it as food to the creatures of the desert." Did you catch that? Heads, plural. This detail connects to ancient Canaanite myths about a seven-headed sea serpent, a creature that was a clear cousin to Leviathan. This isn't just describing an animal. It's describing a cosmic enemy, a chaos dragon. The prophet Isaiah also talks about this battle. In Isaiah 51, the prophet begs God to act like he did in the old days. Was it not you who cut Rahab to pieces, who pierced that monster through? Here, the sea monster Rahab, whose name means arrogance, is used as a poetic nickname for Egypt, a very real enemy of Israel. This shows how ancient writers blended myth and history. To them, the proud, oppressive Egyptian empire was a real-world version of the same chaotic pride God defeated at the dawn of time. The theme pops up again in Isaiah 27, which looks to a future judgment. In that day, the Lord will punish with his sword, his fierce, great, and powerful sword, Leviathan the gliding serpent, Leviathan the coiling serpent. He will slay the monster of the sea. In all these cases, Leviathan is presented as a real force that God physically overpowers. This wasn't just a story about God tidying up the universe. It was about his victory over terrifying forces that stood against order itself. Part 3. The metaphor, argument, and the deeper reality. Okay, so the big question. Isn't this all just a metaphor? Most modern scholars agree that Leviathan is a symbolic figure representing chaos, evil, or powerful enemy nations. It's seen as a poetic tool to talk about God's power, and that's a valid way to see it. When Isaiah calls Egypt Rahab the do-nothing, he's clearly using a monster myth to criticize a human empire. But if it's only a metaphor, why is the description in Job 41 so intensely physical? Why the obsession with its scales, teeth, and fire-breathing lungs? The Bible has plenty of clear metaphors. Jesus calls himself a door, but the text doesn't spend 30 verses describing the door's hinges. The description of Leviathan just feels different. It reads less like a simple symbol and more like an attempt to describe something that, to the ancient mind, was very real. The ancient world was full of mystery, and the sea was a terrifying, unknown abyss, the perfect place for monsters to live. These biblical writers were using the common language of myth and legend to describe the forces opposing God. The multi-headed Leviathan in the Psalms is a clear mark of mythology, not zoology. So we're left with this fascinating tension. On one hand, Leviathan is clearly used as a symbol for abstract ideas like chaos and political enemies. On the other, it's described with a startling realism that suggests a belief in its actual existence. Maybe our modern hang-up on literal versus metaphor is the wrong way to look at it. For the ancient writers, the symbol and the reality might have been woven together. Chaos wasn't just an idea. It had a face, scales, and fiery breath. The monster was the metaphor, made real. This look into the Bible's stranger side reveals a world far more epic than we usually imagine. If you find these hidden histories as fascinating as we do, make sure to subscribe and ring that notification bell so you don't miss our next exploration of ancient mysteries. Conclusion. So what was Leviathan? A real fire-breathing dragon? A mythologized crocodile? Or just a symbol for evil? The answer is probably a mix of all of the above. The biblical authors weren't modern scientists. They were ancient theologians using the most powerful images they knew to communicate deep truths. They drew from stories of terrifying chaos monsters, common in their culture, to paint a picture of God's ultimate power. They described a physical creature so mighty no human could tame it, all to make a point about the God who could. They used the image of God slaying this primordial dragon to declare his total authority over chaos, death, and human arrogance. This imagery gets one final update in the New Testament. In the book of Revelation, The ultimate enemy appears as a great red dragon with 7 heads, who is directly identified as that ancient serpent, who is called the devil and Satan. The chaos monster from the dawn of time becomes the ultimate spiritual enemy at the end of history. Whether these dragons ever swam in our oceans is a question we might never answer. But what's certain is that for the Bible's authors, they were no fairy tale. They were a real and terrifying symbol of the chaotic and evil forces in the universe. And God's victory over them wasn't a gentle fable. It was the bedrock of their faith, a declaration that their God had conquered the darkest abyss to bring light and order into the world. What other monsters in the Bible do you think were real? Let us know in the comments below.